my favorite thing. We're so bitchy. One more cheer for Heather Watkins. Are you having a good time? Are you ready for another comedian? Are we ready for another comedian? There you are. And please, welcome to the stage, the very, very funny Liz Bear!
Liz's in tonight's lineup, right? Which makes sense because it used to be a really popular name. But I think I am the only Liz who's a midwife. Does anybody? Raise your hand if you don't know what a midwife is. Arlo. Yep, that's me. The answer is still Arlo after all this time. I was talking to comedians at the Garage in Albany, and they had said something. I told them I was a midwife and that I had done stand-up there, and they said something like, "Well, we don't talk about that," and that was like what they do for their actual job. And I was like, "Well, what else would I talk about, right?" Because like that's where all my shit comes from. So like normally I talk about like vaginas and stuff. So tonight will be no exception. So what I explained to Arlo, and I've been explaining for weeks, and eventually will kick in, is that like a midwife is not like your doula, right? They're more like your obstetrician. Everybody knows what an OB is, right? They have mid-doctor that delivers babies. But a midwife is nicer, and we don't spend our whole time you're in labor with our hand like up in your vagina, right? Trying to make the baby come out. We just believe that the baby's going to emerge. The other big difference is that we don't think you have the decision-making capacity of a 5-year-old. So like, we trust you to be the one in charge. We're just there if you need us. I first knew I wanted to be a midwife in high school history class when they talked about jobs in medieval history. And they talked about the village midwife as like this mysterious woman who lived in a hut with herbs hanging on the wall. And I was like, I could do that. They're like, that's not a thing anymore. And I was like, well, fuck you, because it turns out it is. Like most, many midwives, I live in the middle of nowhere, right? And I'm our village midwife down in Lebanon. Do you want to come down? But so there are a couple of There are a couple of skills that we learn in more in training or in real practice that we don't get taught in midwifery school. And one of the big skills as a home birth midwife is that we had to learn something called phone triage. And phone triage is where we are deciding by magic over the telephone if you are in labor. Right? Because like we're not sitting around the hospital waiting for you to show up pushing your baby out. Like you call us in the middle of the night and we have to decide if we're going to get in the car and go to your house or not. And in pregnancy, like one thing that we tell people, I think very clearly, is to please, for the love of God, not text us that you are in labor. Thanks to an intern, my phone doesn't make noises when people text me. Everybody's hitting on religion. I'm Mennonite, so I don't know how to use the settings on my iPhone. My students have done it for me, and that's cool. And one of them turned off the noises for the text messages. It's been such a blessing. But so, don't text me that you're in labor, right? And midwives all over the country have received text messages, and I got some of them from friends. But I have a midwife friend who received a text message from a client, and it just said, "My mom did a vaginal exam and says she can feel the head." And I was like, "Why is your mom?" Yeah. Another great one was a midwife friend who, of course, also lived out in the country, and her patient texted and it just said, should I go, I think I'm feeling the urge to push, should I go with it or should I resist that? And it's like, it's a 2-hour drive to your house, kiddo. My favorite one that I always reference in prenatal visits, and this is what I tell people not to send to me, but it said, "OMG, the baby is coming." And I'm like, what point do we not even come? The baby calling us on the phone. And they are calling us in active labor. So what we explain to patients prenatally, right, is that active labor means that your contractions are roughly 4 to 5 minutes apart, lasting about a minute. It's been that way for about an hour, right? And then you should call and tell us to come to your house. But we have gotten a really fun variety of calls over the years. We frequently will get the one from like the first time dad, whose partner's contractions are 10 minutes apart, and he's fucking calling me at midnight to tell me that. And I'm like, cool, go back, have you tried sleeping? That's what I'm gonna do. Right, I'm like, I'll get back later. But, you know, like on the other end of that, we get the dad who calls us when his partner's contractions are 3 minutes apart, and he's hiding in the hallway, and she's in the shower moaning, right? You can hear her like about to push. And he's like, she says she's not in labor, but I don't believe her. And she, of course, is in the background going, don't bother them, they're tired. Which is true, because of the first time. One of the best calls I've ever gotten, praise Jesus, was someone who lived in my town. But I picked up the phone and the dad just goes, Liz, I can see the head. And I was like, I'm gonna need you to call me sooner next time for billing purposes. Right? Like it doesn't count if I just deliver your placenta. I have a really sweet friend who also let me be her midwife, and she called me about 7 years ago. She called at 5 o'clock in the morning, and you know she's like near being due, and she calls and she just goes, I've been trying to poop for hours. And I'm like waking up and I'm like, okay. And I was like, do you want me to come check on you? Like, are you okay? And she's like, no, it's fine. You know, I'm so sorry I called him. You know, I'm calling you about that. I'm just constipated. I don't need you. And I was like, well, you know, I'm up now. So and I get there, and she, of course, is fully dilated, right? Like and I was like, oh, sweetheart, you're crapping out your baby. Right? Like that's not a poop, that's your infant. But it was like she was so sweet about it, and she's like, oh no, don't come over, and I'm like, I'm glad I did. Again, with the insurance billing, right? Yeah. Well, and sort of a different topic, and I know I can't see a lot of you, but has anybody ever called EMS before?
Yeah.
Anybody
Yes.
in front that I can see? Okay. Can I ask what you called about, and can you yell really loud for me?
Well, birth complication?
Oh, yeah, you would have, Tiffany. What this next story is about. So, Tiffany and I were at a birth in Albany a couple weeks ago. The poor lady is trying to get this baby delivered, right? And one of our other midwives calls EMS. They get there because we're a little bit worried about this kiddo. The baby, of course, is fine. And the paramedics and I are standing in the back of the room, and I'm coaching Tiffany through delivering the placenta. I'm like, just go pull in the cord, it's fine. But I lean over to the paramedic next to me because I realize that, like, you know, he might think that Tiffany's a midwife and that she's a total idiot. So I lean over to him and I go, no, she's a student, so like, you know, I'm just kind of talking her through this, like I wouldn't be giving directions if she was another midwife. And the guy leans over to me and he goes, well, it's fine, right? Because you're the lead midwife. You're the midwife supreme. And I was like, oh shit, this is gonna go to my head. And it did. It actually. But what I thought of when I was driving up here for class one day with Arlo was I thought about the Taco Bell Crunchwrap Supreme, which I haven't eaten because I am a midwife, right? So we don't eat that shit. I had to look it up. But what I found out was the Taco Bell Crunchwrap Supreme. It's the protein of your choice with sour cream, nacho cheese folded in a tortilla. And I'm thinking about it on the way up here, and I was like, oh, it's cheap and salty and full of cheese, which is me. I'm the midwife supreme.